This last chunk is about 20 to 30 minutes. It will depend on you. Um, Having been very fortunate, I've worked in the banking business, working for banks for 35 years and consulting for another 3 to 4 years, helping some banks in this area get started. The regulators that I got to know or got to know me. I've worked in Maine and Connecticut, helping troubled banks get healthy, etc. Um, it has, as I said when we started, leadership and management became something I realized that folks who understand the impact that a quality leader and management team mean to the folks in the business is a big deal. And the one that I tease about a lot is I never considered myself, and still don't, that smart. I had a slight skill of deciding to only hire really smart, good people because they made me look like a damn genius. And I'm very fortunate to have banking and business was very good to me and my family. And I totally attributed to the folks I had the pleasure of working with and frankly for. Um, it makes a big deal. So this last chunk is about leadership and management. Mr. Troy, if you could pop that module up, and if all goes well, we're going to be done ahead of schedule, maybe. Holly, if you're the one with the munchkin, it made me smile. Thank you. Yeah, leadership. What traits must a leader have in order to be successful? Folks, your participation helps this. If you don't jump in, I will throw some stuff up there. But I am curious, only the last, I'm not a registered anything political except an independent. Leadership is the characteristics I tracked about 10 years. The numbers are all almost 4.5 years old. They were published in 18, but they were from 2016. So what I'll do is key leadership traits. Honesty is at the top of the page, which I've always been. I don't know what they'd show up in 2021 and 22. But as a banker, it was a big deal for me because if I can't trust you, I ain't lending you money. I'm not opening an account for you. And more importantly, as we go through this module, I had the opportunity. I was in New York strictly as a lender for about 14 years. I got the opportunity. I got solicited, a headhunter found me to go and co-manage a branch network of 120 branches, and two of us I had half the branches and the lending units for that part of the network. So I had, frankly, 600 people. I had never managed the retail side of the business. And in the first, after accepting the job and understanding I was working for a very, very bright individual, I went and interviewed and asked questions of 60 branch managers, 60 assistant branch managers, and about half the platform and teller staff. So somewhere around 400 people, and the lending staff. And interesting, what I learned was that they didn't trust me or anybody in management, and they frankly were terribly frustrated, which is why some of this became very important to me. Honesty was key because in general, managements in the banking industry promised, we'll do that, and rarely did things change. The company I joined in Baltimore was, quotes, healthy, but regulators evaluate banks and they give them ratings. And it had some black marks. And that was customer service was terrible. The bank leadership had failed some categories in terms of communication and in terms of back office support. And I could run lists of auditing issues, et cetera. So to improve that, this crazy person, me, after talking to all these people, what they were frustrated with was, frankly, education. So we took the TV game Jeopardy and turned it into a game for everybody, all 600 people, exclusive of me, which I took a lot of noise for. But somebody had to run the game. At least that's what I told myself. It taught me a bunch of things. One, there were folks who were not salespeople, who didn't know anything about sales, but they understood the whole back office operation and interaction with human resources and the back offices of the lending areas. And those folks got included also. And an amazing thing happened. I made a deal with these folks that at the end of that, we did it for 9 months, and then set goals and objectives for the following year for the entire system, the 60 branches that we were part of, and the lending folks. And I made a promise to the staff that if we met or exceeded our numbers, I would walk off our annual sales meetings stage in my underwear. And I know that sounds absolutely absurd, and God would want to see that. I promised, as I said that, because I said it to the whole group at the meeting the year before, that you can count on there being at least 4 or 5 pairs of gym shorts under that underwear, but my bony knees will be sticking out. They met and exceeded the numbers. The part it taught me is that overwhelming feeling of their success created trust in management, and it stuck with me forever. That if you don't trust the company, the person you're working for, it's really hard. It's really, really hard, and can be disconcerting. And for many folks, that what they do, it is not easy to transition to something else necessarily, family issues, whatever. So these characteristics, honesty became the top of the list because of that exercise and became something I used in my consulting practice for 4 years. The ability to see where we're going, vision, competency, inspiring, intelligent, fair-minded, broad-minded, supportive, straightforward, dependable. And this is over a 10-year period. Stephen Covey still is, but was in the 90s and up until about 10 years ago, very active in the leadership management practice. And he had a quote that I kept and stuck on this sheet. If you don't believe in the messenger, you won't believe the message. That evening taught me that evening in that 18-month period of folks coming together, really putting a tremendous effort into this process. For me, it was like, wow, this works. Leading and building a company culture has 5 typical building blocks. Sometimes I tease and tell my children and their spouses, I would like to take you to class just once, because the impact of these things, they go, Dad, damn, where did you find this stuff? Believe me, I stole it from much smarter people. There are 5 typical building blocks. Vision, the ability to see and define where we're going. Understanding the skill sets, not just you need, that any and everybody in the company needs in order to be successful. That folks, the salary is important, but sometimes some additional incentives, and it's not always money. It's the flexibility, it's childcare, it's an extra couple of days off, etc. Having the tools, resources to do the job, and more importantly, do we have a plan? Is there a roadmap? Missing one component leads to mishaps as shown on the attached chart. Leading and building a company culture. I get silly with this. My kids would tell you, sometimes dad was running the family like he was running the business. I don't know. Any which way. If you have the skills, the incentives, the resources, and the action plan, but you don't have vision, you don't know where you're going, you get confusion. That just makes sense to me. This was not, banking clearly had this. The one that I saw most in banking was the next one. There was some vision, but no one had been trained in years at any level unless you came from outside the institution. And I had worked in New York, and so my lending exposure and training was very regimented. Professors at Columbia University scared me sometimes. But that was the reason I got hired. Is I was someone said, "Wait a minute, we need some of that stuff." Incentives are there sometimes, resources and an action plan. You get anxiety because you can't get the incentives, resources, and action plan completed because you don't have the skill sets you need to do the job efficiently. You have vision and skills, no incentives. This is probably very typical of lots of companies in the last 15 years. No, that's a lie. In the last 5 years, incentives have become not just for the sales staff, but across the board in many small, medium-sized companies in the country, because folks have figured out that stuff motivates the staff. So without incentives, but you have the resources and the action plan, you get gradual change. It may be the safest one, but incentives are becoming more and more digestible by corporate America or companies in America. Vision, skills, incentives, no resources, frustration. This was very much banking. I can remember a branch manager who I loved. I don't mean in the romantic sense, but I did love her. Hazel Crone. Hazel and I sat for a couple of hours, and she said, "You want answers that are truthful and to the point. I'm telling you right now, you're not going to like them, and you may get mad at me." And I said, "Hazel, I got no chance of being successful at that if you're just the tip of the iceberg, or more importantly, you're the one speaking up. I know darn well there's got to be a whole lot of people just not speaking up who feel the same way." She said, "You ask, this is 1990-ish, 92, yeah, that range." She said, "John, you guys are asking the teller staff to answer the phone." She said, "Do you know where the phones are in the branches with tellers?" And I said, I looked at her, she says, "No, the answer is you don't know." I said, "No, I don't." She said, "They're behind the teller. They're 10 to 15 feet behind the teller." Now, in the last 3-4 years, cash was dwindling because people were using cards for everything. But a teller would get fired for leaving the teller window without closing the door and locking it. Minimally would get written up, put on a warning, and if something screws up in the next 30 days, they're gone. She said, "Who the hell's going to go answer that damn phone?" Looked at her and I said, and I'm writing away like crazy. For the next hour, she went through a sequence of things about branch audits, about how we asked those folks to help us and have done nothing to provide them with the resources. The last one, vision, skills, incentives, and resources, no plan, lots of false starts. That's lots of companies in the country. Folks are pretty sure they know where they want to go. They've hired people with skills. They're willing to provide incentives, and they give them the tools. We just don't know what we want to be when we grow up, so we don't have a plan. We don't know how to get there. If you have a question, throw the rock. Leaders have certain behaviors and commitments to certain practices. They model a way by clarifying their personal values and aligning actions with shared values. Um, my wife has heard me tell a story to some friends a couple of times. That evening at this group, and it happened in other times, but this particular time stuck with me, obviously, forever. Um, I was almost actually afraid, which is not the correct word, but I was overwhelmed on how much influence it looked like this program had, and that it was being attached to the management folks, myself and 5 regional managers, who had helped orchestrate and put this program together. We all talked about it. I said, man, I just thought it was a game and they were having fun and they were learning and it was successful. I had no idea it was being associated so strongly with the group. They bring meaning to the future and inspire a shared vision. Leaders challenge this one I love, and maybe it may be a characteristic I too easily champion. Leaders challenge the process and champion innovation, are willing to take risks, celebrating wins and learning from mistakes. Banking is in a business I learned right away, full of tons of regulations, and frankly, things we were and have been doing till I left, retired, forever. And when you ask why, because we do that, I'm going, but why? And that was part of the crazy game in Baltimore, was the particular town that all happened in. We'd ask the people in human resources, why do 4 people have to sign this promotion for the manager? The regional person signs it. If you want, I'll sign it. That's 2. Anything after that's ridiculous. You go through that kind of stuff, and taking some of those boundaries away changes how business gets done. Leadership fosters cooperation and team goals to build trust and strengthen others by sharing power. I think delegating with authority to folks that work with you. Now, new entrepreneurs, it may be you and 3 people, 2 people, it may be you. But as your business develops, my son-in-law now has between 3 places. He's probably got a couple of 100 people working for him. And when they started out, it was 3 partners and 15 people. As it develops, those things become very, very important. Leadership recognizes and celebrates individual excellence, fostering team and company spirit. And I apologize, Troy, before we do this again, I got to fix a couple of the typos. Is leadership, good question, folks. And the answer is everybody's got an opinion. Is leadership in the DNA, or can it be learned? I'm just curious. You have a thought, pop it up there. I'm a believer it can be learned. Leadership, both, very good. I like the both. I'm a big believer. There are some folks, it has components of very good, excellent, folks. What skills are essential to be a successful manager? I think the first argument is, I think managing and leading can be combined. Traditional managers tend to be process focused. There are inherited traits. Yeah, I didn't catch you first. I apologize. I'm trying to jump up and read that. Yes, sometimes there are flares of people, I think, that just impress the daylights out of me. The gentleman I worked for in Baltimore was a very low-key, did not seek the limelight. He was just very bright, shared responsibility, was quick to define what he expected. He was very good on communicating both ways, to him and from him. But he wasn't a reports guy. He wasn't an audit person. All of which are things in my business, in the banking business, that were critical. Making sure the numbers were correct, making sure process was being followed, et cetera, et cetera. Typically, a successful manager is very focused on process, understands where we're going and what are the tools we need to get there. Let me flip. Management, creating company policy and organizing, planning, controlling, I don't like that word, but it's necessary, and directing an organization's resources to achieve the policy objectives. That's a definition from the Business Dictionary. Webster's, making decisions about a business, the act or process of deciding how to use something. More process oriented is always how I have looked at it, though they can be combined. Leadership management tools to guide and build a focused culture. My daughter is a very successful salesperson with a company, Mythix. They are the largest reseller of Oracle software to the United States, of Oracle software. Her part of that process is selling software to the federal government. Next weekend, this weekend on Sunday, her twins will be 3 years old. 3 years ago when they were born, and she got married a little later in life. She and her husband both hadn't been married, didn't have kids. And when the kids came along, the shell shock of her father having, you always said the toughest job you ever had was being a parent. And I said, yeah, it was. Nearly killed me. I said, so they both work. And they're both busy, and the restaurant businesses can be crazy hours. She hired a nanny, and the first one lasted about a month, and my daughter just said, this isn't working. And then she hired somebody, and she was about 90, 120 days, and grandma and grandpa were helping a fair amount, I think, and it seemed to weigh a little less heavy on her. And all of a sudden, she was just super frustrated, and we were down helping with something, and she was carrying on about how frustrated she was. And I said, you didn't happen to sit down and give this young lady a job description? I got the most miserable look, a couple of those in her lifetime that I remember. And she just looked at me and she said, no, I did not. And we talked about it for a few more minutes. And the young lady, they did that in the next couple of days. And the young lady resigned, I think, a couple of weeks later. And then she found somebody. And the person who came in said, well, let's sit down and talk about what you want me to do. And they put a job description together. And my daughter, whose name is Colleen, said, Dad, I did it right this time. We did it right this time. People need to know what you expect. You ought to understand what skills they should have for doing the job. Real important. And goals and objectives, people don't figure it out. You have to work with them. Set goals and expectations together, making sure there is understanding and buy-in. And again, it may be you and two people, but everybody got to be on the same page. Goals and objectives must be clear, attainable, and measurable. You can't just say, well, I wanted you to do more than that. Training and education needs to be continuous. I am married to the same woman for 47 and a half years. She was a high school English math teacher, then special ed teacher. I am absolutely sure education is ongoing forever in your life. And on the job, if it's just you, you're a sole entrepreneur and there are nobody else, education is ongoing. It may be formal, it may be you have to find ways to continue to keep yourself up to date. If I'm not mistaken. Yes. Folks, these are folks, if you can, yes, you can. There's a bookcase behind me. There are probably a dozen to 20, or maybe a couple of dozen books by some of these folks back there. And because I'm an old fart, I probably haven't bought a new one in 3 or 4 years. Peter Drucker, Kouzes and Posner, one of my favorite groups, the two of them. Stephen Covey. Tom Peters was real hot in the 80s and 90s. I haven't heard anything in years, but I enjoyed him immensely. Jim Collins. Edward Deming was the, I guess, the one of the founders of the leadership industry. Harvey Robbins and Michael Finley and Spencer Johnson. There are many more, but these may be folks you may have an interest in. When I finish, I always, and I think I am, ladies and gentlemen, it has been my pleasure. If a question pops up in the next 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, certainly go back through Troy, Don Miller, Cheryl Sagaster. I am always happy to help. I will help put your numbers together, help work on your business plan with you. I have a request, and we'll go through the long explanation, that if you do, I'm going to give you my email address, which has changed. Please contact, if you are in the program and working on your business plan, just let whoever you're working with know that you are going to be calling John to talk about balance sheets, cash flow, or some crazy problem that's come up that is financially driven and you want a banker's insight. My email address is John, John, Chattleton, CHA, 2 T's, LETON, @gmail.com.